Howdy everyone, I am the CVA, the Community Volunteer Ambassador for the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and do our general consent statement. As a visible disclosure, we'd like to inform any participants that any and all Zoom series is and will be recorded. The purpose of this is to provide the Zoom series to those who participated or missed out on the session. It is also provided the information for participants to refer back to. In addition to the visible disclosure, the statement will be orally stated at the beginning of each Zoom series like I am now. And I'm going to stop sharing and hand it off to Riza to introduce our guest speaker today.
Hi, everyone. We have a really exciting presentation. Mike Mackey is going to show us not only his owl, but he's actually is a licensed falconer and has had other raptors in his lifetime. And he's also our IT guy at the park. And so he's a really swell guy, super passive, and really excited that he's here to show us his owl. So Mike, it's all yours. And if folks could remind to mute yourselves unless you have a question. He's willing to take questions during the presentation, but just remind yourself to mute yourself afterwards. We found that some folks had an issue with audio in the past, and so we found a way to troubleshoot it was to make sure we're all muted for a while. All right, Mike, go ahead.
All right, thanks. That's a great
Never
way to
mind.
start, huh? Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, good. So anyway, yeah, I decided one of the reasons to take questions during the presentation is, presentations with live animals, you never know how they're going to go. And I would hate for something to happen. We have to end it and you didn't get your questions answered. So if at any time you have a question, just go ahead and speak up. So this is Mage. We think it's a she, we don't know for sure, is a great horned owl. And the way that I got her was last March, one of our rangers had a great horned owl dropped off by a visitor at night at his house, and he really didn't know what to do with it at the time. And actually, the proper thing to do, if you find any baby bird actually, is to take that bird back to its nest. And that's the best thing that you can do for a bird. But since we didn't know where she came from, and I'll refer to it as she, because I think it's a she, but we'll eventually find out later. She doesn't usually sit on the fist. She usually flies around in my patio in the evening. So this is her middle of the night. She's a nocturnal creature. So kind of woke her up from her sleep, and she's not used to sitting on my fist. So she might be a little bit restless right now. But anyway, we got her when she was about, when she was probably about 2 to 3 weeks old. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you a picture of what she was like. So this is Mage the day after we got her. And you can see at that time, she's just really a ball of fluff and down. There were a few feathers starting to pin out in her tail, but we suspect by what she looked like at that age was probably about 2 to 3 weeks old. And then as time went by, I'm going to just go through a series of photos here to show you her. As she's getting older, you can see some of the feathers are starting to pin out. This is probably another week later. And these are generally about a week or so apart. And what you'll really notice is feathers starting to come in to replace the down. And there she is. This is not her first Zoom session. There were other Zoom sessions before. And starting to experiment with her wings. One of my favorite parts of this photo is my golden retriever over here going, oh, somebody's taking all the attention away from me. And again, you can see feathers starting to replace the down. At this age, she was basically in the house, living in my son's room, pretty much free-flighted. She's just kind of learning how to fly, so she wasn't being tethered at all in any way. This was when we did a program in the office when she was much younger, obviously. She was in my office for a day. And this was when we first put the cuffs on her. If you look at her legs, you'll see the little leather straps around her feet. That's how she's actually restrained now. I then put jesses through holes in the cuffs. So that's how she's now restrained. And there's probably about a month or so that I couldn't find any pictures of her. So she pretty much went from that to her full-grown appearance. This was about a month or 6 weeks ago. And that was a nice picture because she actually had her tuffs up at that time. So she's pretty much, let me come back to a live shot here. Are we back to a live shot? Okay, good. So she's pretty much has her juvenile plumage. I just actually learned today that the juvenile plumage is a little bit different than what she will have when she gets older. They say as she gets older, she won't be quite as red. She'll be more of a gray. And the white, if she would turn around, the white that's on her neck and the white that's down her breast will probably be a little bit more pronounced. And again, I'm not an expert on owls. I'm not an ornithologist. It's just pretty much learning how to deal with birds of prey and to be safe with them and to treat them basically with respect. And my goal is to actually get her out, hopefully this fall, and get her hunting. One of the primary sources of food for a great horned owl is cottontail rabbits, but they'll eat almost anything that moves. Obviously, they're great rodent hunters with rats and mice. They'll take other birds, they'll take gophers, they'll take fish, they'll take frogs, they'll eat just about anything. But my goal would be to get her out and to have her hunt cottontail rabbits, which is pretty much what I've done with the red-tailed hawks that I've had in the past. And I've read different things about great horned owls as in falconry, and there's a lot of mixed issue on it. Some people say that they just will go and sit up in a tree, and it's sometimes even hard to get back. But other people have had good luck with them, so we'll see how she does. So anyway, when we got the owl from the ranger, my first response was to actually try and take it to a rehabilitation center so that they could actually raise it and then release it. But the great horned owl is one of 2 species of owls that, as a falconer in the state of California, that we can possess. And that's the great horned owl and the barred owl, which doesn't really occur here in Southern California. It's Northern California and back east. So it is one of 2 species of owls that we can keep as a falconer. And she's definitely imprinted. So whether she will ever be released or not, it's very doubtful. And then of course I've read that owls in captivity have lived up to 50 years. So hopefully she'll be around for quite a while. As you can see, she's actually very, very gentle with my hand. She just kind of nibbles on them. She'll generally let me pet her on the top of her head. But the thing that you have to be careful with owls and really all birds of prey is their feet. And I'll see if I can bring this up closer here for you. Some people have said that the great horned owl has the same power in their talons as a golden eagle. So luckily, an imprinted owl, or most imprinted birds, don't tend to be very footy. And footy is what we refer to as reaching out with their feet if they get angry and grabbing you. And I've had that happen to me with some of the red tails that I've had, and even a Cooper's hawk that I had. And I have a video here. Let me share my desktop again on why you need to be careful with a bird's feet. This was a red tail that had just caught a rabbit, and he had a stick sticking out of his wing, and I went to get the stick out, and that's footing right there. So that's why you need to be very, very careful with birds of prey. You'll see when people are handling birds of prey, they're always holding their feet. The bite isn't really bad at all, but you definitely want to be careful with the feet. And hopefully when you get footed by a bird, it releases pretty quick, like this red tail did. and it's definitely something you need to be careful about with birds of prey. So like I said, when you'll see people handling birds of prey that are not basically tame birds, you'll see them holding their feet, because that is definitely the most dangerous part of this bird. And I've also heard with great horned owls, a lot of people that have taken them for falconry have found that they really need to be taken from the nest if they're going to be taken for falconry. And they can legally be taken for falconry from the nest in the first 2 weeks. Much after that, they tend to be very wild and very aggressive. And they do tend to kind of key in on one person that takes care of them the most. And that would be my son, who actually raised her the most. And then me. She's pretty good with me, but with my son, she's actually very, very, very gentle. And then with other folks, she tends to be aggressive. So you just have to be very, very careful with her. Let's see, we talked about the food, her size. So for great horned owls, I've been reading and I found that the great horned owls from Southern California are actually the smallest species of great horned owl, the smallest subspecies of great horned owl that we find in North America. And they are spread all through North America, from Mexico up into near the Arctic and also down into to South America. And this is actually considered one of the smallest subspecies. She weighs about 2 pounds, and I think it's probably a female based on her size because she is larger. She is a larger part of the weight. She is larger than what an average male great horned owl would weigh at this stage in her life. So we think it's a female. You can see the equipment here that I have to hold her onto my fist, which is a leash. Let's see. Yep, a leash that goes to the jesses here, and then those jesses go through loops that are in the cuffs around her legs. And what we usually do with her each night is she's very quiet during the day. Really, you can tell that she's sleeping and not really doing anything. And then as the sun starts to go down, she gets more vocal. She lives in a large enclosure in the backyard. It's probably 10 by 20 feet, and it's free flighted in there. And she knows that as soon as sundown comes and it starts getting dark, she gets more vocal. She knows it's time to eat, so my son and I will go out and get her. She readily comes to food, and then we have a larger screened-in patio where we'll spend an hour or two with her in the evening, and she just flies around. She chases tennis balls and all sorts of things. You can definitely tell that she has that hunting instinct. She'll hear noises outside the patio, and you can tell that the hearing is just tremendous, tremendous hearing. Come on. I know, you're not used to this. And I'll watch her, and there'll just be a noise that I can't hear outside, and she will just key in and stare. And her ability to see in the dark is amazing because I have a camera in her enclosure at night, and at night she's just very active, flying around in the enclosure, looking at different things. So, like I said, our goal is to eventually get her out and hunting game in free flight. And the way that we'll do that is we'll put her on what's called a creance, which is really just a long leash. And we'll set out some food. And as long as we're comfortable that she's going after the food that we set out and we can get her back without her trying to fly off, will pretty much be the time when we would take her out and let her free fly. We'd probably take her out in the early morning when it's dark. Because if we were to take her out in the evening and she were to take off, being a nocturnal animal, there's no telling where she would go. Although we do put radio telemetry on them so we can track them. But if we took her out early in the morning, then as soon as it got light, she would probably try and roost up in a tree somewhere, and she would be easier to retrieve. Just like with the other birds that I've flown, like a red tail or the Cooper's hawk, I take them out in the evening. And I've had some birds take off on me, and as soon as night comes, though, they pretty much will go roost up in a tree, and then I can generally retrieve them the next morning when they're hungry again. So that's our goal with her. Like I said, she's imprinted. I don't know if she'd ever be released. If she did, it would probably have to be at a time when we know that she can hunt food on her own and could take care of herself, and it would have to be someplace very remote, because she does have an affinity to people. She definitely likes people. So, but in any regard, she's come on. She's a neat animal to have around. I've always enjoyed raptors since I was a young kid, and to be able to actually hunt with them is really the neatest part of the whole experience. To see these animals go from a soar and pursue their game is actually a pretty neat experience. So let's see what else about Mage. If you'll notice, her horns are not up, and I just learned today that the actual name for the horns is a flumicorn. It's almost like a unicorn. So it's the flume of the feathers, and I guess maybe it comes from unicorn, or something sticking out. But she doesn't tend to put those out while she's on the fist. If I go and look at her during the day out in her enclosure, she'll just be sitting there quietly, and her horns will sometimes be up. Like I said, she weighs about 2 pounds, and she's fed right now mostly on farm-raised quail that I get frozen, and we do occasionally get rats that people have caught that we know have no chance of being poisoned. So we try and give her as wide a variety of diet as we can. Some of my son's other birds, he has some Harris's hawks that he hunts with, and when he gets rabbits with them, we'll feed her rabbit. So she gets rabbit, squirrel, rats, the quail. So we try and give our birds as much of a varied diet as we can. Let's see what else. Any questions that anybody has? You have a question.
Yes.
Why am I here? Yes.
There are some questions.
Yeah.
Do you put live food in your enclosure yet?
No live food yet. We'll probably start her off with live mice, and live rats. So she will have a chance to pursue some live food, and then I also have some small dogs. And her reaction, obviously they're never together, but her reaction to some of the small dogs leads me to believe that if I had her out hunting and there was a rabbit or some other game around, that she would definitely pursue it. So I'm very anxious to get her out hunting and actually see what she does.
And what are some of the signs of imprinting?
So, I'm sorry, what was that?
What are some of the signs of imprinting?
Of imprinting. Not afraid of anybody that comes by, definitely. Other birds that I've had are birds that were taken as juveniles. So in that regard, those birds, like for instance, red-tailed hawks that we take as a juvenile that have already fledged the nest and have been hunting on their own, living on their own. All I'm really doing with those birds is teaching them to trust me and that I'm a source of food. But other than that, they really want to have nothing to do with me. Whereas this imprinted bird, like I said, in the evening when she starts waking up and she can see us from out in the backyard, she can see us moving around the house. She starts vocalizing. She wants to come in. She wants to be with us. Whereas the other birds that I've had, they like to go out and hunt, and they know I'm a source of food. But if they have their choice and they're not hungry, they're not going to have anything to do with me. And that's how we release our birds that we trap in falconry. If we do have a juvenile bird, is we'll keep it for a season or two, we'll hunt it, and then feed it up, get it fat, release it, and it really has no interest in you other than as being a source of food. Whereas this bird has a social interaction with us, much like a dog or a cat, although it is still a wild animal, but in a very similar way. It likes the human social interaction. Yeah.
And does she sleep sitting on a branch or inside a closed area?
Yeah, she will sleep sitting on a branch. And it's called a mew. A mew is what we call the enclosure that we use in falconry. And it's got windows all around. She tends to sit up in the highest part of the mew, and the back of our yard slopes down into the neighbor's yard. She tends to sit up there and look into our neighbors. And there's a big tree back there too. So she tends to sit up there, and she's just quiet all day long. And like I said, during the day, you're nothing from her, but definitely at night, she's active, and she's looking at something right now. What are you looking at there? She's keyed in on something. Probably the blind moving over there. But like I said, another trait of imprinting is generally all the juvenile birds that I've had, I have to be real careful of their feet. And this bird, I have to be careful of her feet too. But they're if my hand was anywhere near their feet, they tend to be very defensive and will hit you with their feet. But I'm still very careful with her feet. Like I said, a lot of people have said that they have a similar foot strength to the golden eagle, and that's a big bird. So I definitely do not want to be footed by her anytime. But one other unique trait about an owl that I learned after I got her was the size of their eyes. Their eyes are similar in size to our eyes. So if you take the proportion of the eye to the body, their eyes are just humongous. And that's part of the reason why they have such good sight. They do have a lot of cones in their eyes. I believe it's cones versus rods for night vision. So they have excellent vision in the dark. They have excellent hearing. That's primarily how they find their food, is by the sound of animals in the brush, and then keying in with their just tremendous eyesight at night. And they do tend to hunt just by sitting in a tree and waiting for things to pass by. So they're very opportunistic feeders. They don't really care much for carrion. They do like most of their prey live. They don't like food if it's been rotting for a while. And they're a very aggressive bird in the wild. I've seen some videos of owls coming in and taking red-tailed chicks out of the nest. So they're very predatory and very aggressive birds in the wild. I believe early on they were called the tiger owl. A lot of people have claimed that they're one of the most aggressive birds that are out there in terms of raptors. But not you, right? You're a gentle one. Yes.
Mike, can you explain the vocalization?
Yeah, this is typical vocalization that you would hear from a chick that is in its nest, and it's asking its parent to feed it, pay attention to it, just letting it know that it's here. So it's nothing more than, I'm here. If you got some food, feed me. Yeah, it's definitely just a teenage complaint, I guess you could say. I'm not really sure, other than just letting us know that it's here. A lot of times she'll cue in on something and she won't say anything because she wants to listen. But if she's not really paying attention to anything and she's with us, this is just the constant noise that she makes, especially when she's around us. If I put her back in her mew, we turn out the lights. She's quiet at night, but as soon as I come out, if I let the dogs out at 2 a.m., she sees me coming out, this is what I hear. It's like, hey, this is my time to play. Bring me in the house. So it's definitely a vocalization, a social vocalization that just let me know that she's here and she's around.
And there's a few questions about her hunting strategy. So can she carry her prey, or does she eat it where it's caught?
Probably take it to a place that's safe, whether that's under a bush or up in a tree. Most birds of prey don't like to be exposed after they've caught their game, because then they become potential victims themselves or lose their prey. So another thing that I've learned about great horned owls is they tend to have one of the strongest ability to lift heavy weights. So they can easily take a 2-pound owl, a 2-pound rabbit up into a tree or someplace safe and eat it. So for the most part, birds of prey like to take their prey and hide somewhere to eat. They don't like to eat out in the open. So they will take it somewhere. I know. You're getting tired. It's middle of the night for you.
And how large is their home range?
I don't know for sure, but I have heard that great horned owls and red-tailed hawks tend to occupy the same environment, whereas one is diurnal and the other is nocturnal. Is that right? Diurnal? Is that daytime? Anyway, one is active during the day, the other is active during the night. And the fact that red tails generally have a range of, you know, maybe 5 or 6 miles, I'm assuming that the great horned owl is probably the same, but I don't know that for sure. They don't migrate, as far as I know. They're pretty much resident species, and I've heard that they do not build their own nests, that they tend to occupy other nests. So they will occupy a red tail's nest, and they're one of the earliest nesters in the year too, starting to nest in January, by the fact that she was probably born around the 1st of March, and they incubate for 28 days. So they're very early nesters.
So do the young stay long, I'm guessing, with the in the nest, or do they fledge
Yeah,
out?
from what I understand, there have been observations of young hanging around with the adults through the fall, through this time, as they're learning how to hunt, making sure that they get fed. But probably about this time, they're starting to get kicked out of the nest, or at least being pushed out of the range of where the parents are. So they hang around for a while the parents are feeding them and making sure that they can survive on their own. Yep.
And do great horned owls have other predators or enemies?
They do. You know, other birds of prey, like I'm sure a red tail, if they got in a tangle with a red tail could come out on top at times. I'm sure golden eagles, bald eagles can definitely take them, although you know, I've heard that they're pretty well matched. If they're on the ground, they're vulnerable to coyotes, you know, bobcats. I don't think a mountain lion would really mess with one, but yeah, while they're on the ground, that's one reason why they like to hide when they're consuming their food, is they become prey to other ground mammals. I know a lot of falconers who have lost a lot of their birds when they're out hunting in the desert to coyotes. Coyotes have come and killed some of their birds. So when they're on the ground, they're definitely susceptible to other predators.
Someone noticed the purr she has.
Yeah, it's not really a purr. I mean, this is her most common noise, this wonderful scream. Luckily, it's never really much louder than this, so it's not too bad. My neighbors haven't complained, so that's a good sign that it's not too bad. She also has like a little chitter. Whenever I feed her, it'll be a kind of a trill chitter, and I think that's kind of a happy sound. It's like, oh, I'm getting fed. So there's kind of a trill or a kind of a chitter that she makes. She did hoot once. We did have a wild rat that we caught, and she chased it around and hooted. That was the first time that she hooted. She hasn't hooted since. But I've heard that it takes pretty much through the first year before they start hooting. So.
And how did she get her name? Is there a meaning to her name?
Yeah, Mage. My son came up with it. It's an old world name for magician. So that's where she got her name from. She was found on St. Patrick's Day, so I probably would have named it Patrick, since we didn't know what the sex was, or something like that. But I think Mage is a pretty good name. It's actually stuck with her well. Hoping she turns out to be a female. I'd kind of be bummed if it turns out to be a male, but that's okay. Either way, still a good bird.
And how often do they mate?
How often do they what?
Do they mate?
My understanding is they mate for life, and they will have one clutch a year. I did just read something today as I was refreshing my great horned owl knowledge that, well, this was back in the early turn of the century. It's a Smithsonian Institute article. It's actually a really good article on observations of great horned owls. And someone had a captured a tamed great horned owl, and in its 7th year it laid eggs. And actually the owl was by itself, so the eggs were infertile, and they replaced the eggs with fertile chicken eggs, and they hatched, and she didn't eat them. So you know, they thought they were her chicks, which I thought was very interesting. So if you ever lay any eggs, we may put in some fertile chicken eggs there and see what she does. So I thought that was an interesting story. But again, to answer the question, it's once a year, and they'll usually have a clutch of anywhere from 1 to 5 eggs, and on the average 2 or 3.
Yeah. All right. And when you mentioned she could take a 2-pound rabbit, that means that's probably the heaviest item she could probably hunt, or is there?
No, she could. My guess is, I know that Harrises and red-tailed hawks, which are similar size, can take jackrabbits, and they're 4 to 5 pounds. I'm sure that she. I know they hunt jackrabbits as well. So yeah, she could definitely take something larger than a 2-pound rabbit. I hate to say it, they've been known to take house cats. So you know, be careful if you have cats that are outside, especially at night. Unfortunately, though, if an owl or any bird of prey were to attack a house cat, generally a scratch from a house cat is fatal to any bird of prey. Just the bacteria that's in the scratch of a cat is generally fatal to all birds of prey. So it's really worse on these birds than it is the cats anyway. Look that way. Look at the camera.
So how long will it take to determine the sex, whether she's male or female?
I mean, I could, you know, take a feather right now and send it in, and I think it's $25 to get it tested, and we'd know in a week or so. Once it starts hooting, and I don't know owl hoots that well, but apparently you can tell the difference between a male and a female hoot to determine the sex. So whether we pluck a feather, that's just one of the breast feathers would be fine, or wait until it starts hooting and then try and figure it out. We'll wait and see. So yeah, the only way to tell is by the hoot or by genetically testing a feather. Yeah. I know, sorry. Look that way. Don't look at me. Hey.
And someone has a question about pair of owls, like parents or young.
Yeah.
Do they hoot to each other at night?
Yeah, my understanding it's part of a mating call, and it's also part of a territorial song, if you would call it that. So I hear them out here once in a while, but they're generally, you hear them more in the wintertime when they're establishing their nesting territory, but you'll hear them all year long. I love to hear the hoot of a great horned owl. It's much better than this scream. So yeah, no, it's just part of their vocalization.
And do your other raptors get nervous with her around?
You know, the only other raptor we have right now is a Harris's hawk that my son has, and their mews are separated just by a walkway of 2 or 3 feet. And this Harris, well, Harris hawks can be very, very aggressive. They're excellent hunters of rabbits. Whenever he sees her, he's flying full bore at her to take her on. So I have to be careful when I'm definitely moving them around and they can see each other. So yeah, I don't know what would happen if those two got together. It would not be it would be an ugly sight for sure. Hey, this way, this way.
Now, do great horned owls eat reptiles like snakes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Reptiles, you know, frogs, snakes, they'll eat fish. They are very opportunistic feeders. One of the most opportunistic feeders of all raptors, from what I hear. Yeah. Yeah. Turn that way. Look, don't look at me. Look at the camera.
So if I missed any questions, go ahead and ask Mike yourself. There's some quick blurbs. I don't know if they're blurbs or questions.
Yeah.
There's a question.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you? So you said that in the fall you were going to let it go out and hunt alone. I mean, obviously alone.
Right.
It seems like there's a pretty close attraction. Are you pretty sure you'll come back, afterwards, or is there a chance that she'll get so used to being on her own that she'll eventually leave and you'll never see her again?
Yeah, that's one of the problems with imprinted birds is it probably would not leave because it does have a social interaction with us. Now she may, if we were out hunting and she's flying free and she catches something, she may take it up into a tree and start eating. And really the key in falconry to get your birds back is to have them hungry. So if she catches something and I'm not there with her when she gets it or nearby, they can take their food somewhere and eat it. And if they're not hungry, there's not a lot of desire to come back at that time. Now with an imprinted bird, it may be a little bit different, but with these passage birds, these juvenile birds that we trap, generally, like I said, I've had a couple birds take off in the evening and they come back the next morning with food, and they know that I'm a source of food for them. They come right back. So I don't know. Not a lot of people have really hunted with great horns before, so there's not a lot of information out there on them. Some have had some pretty good success, and others have said that don't waste your time with them. So it'll just be a wait and see, and we'll learn a lot during her training to see how she responds when we put food out on it's called a lure, and we'll throw some food, maybe some frozen quail out on an attached line, have her chase it, and if she just stays there and eats it and let us approach and grab her, then that's a sign that she's not going to take off. So we won't know. It's going to be a learning experience here the next few months.
Mike, what would happen if you hooted at her?
I've done that. She just looks at me like, what are you doing? She's like, you're not an owl. Don't even try that. But it's weird. I've played different owl sounds like on my phone, and she'll turn her head and look like, what is that? So, but yeah, she's definitely, when she hears a new sound, she keys in on it to try and figure out what it is. So turn your head that way. I don't want to look at the back of your head. That way. That way. There. Yeah.
There she is. And from my understanding, they do molt, right?
They do. Yep.
And there's their time of year that they...
Yeah, it's usually in the summertime, because that's the time when they can afford to have less feathers. And it's a process that usually takes 4 or 5 months. So they'll just lose a few feathers at a time and regrow them. If a bird lost all of its feathers at once, obviously it would not survive. So she probably won't molt until next late spring or early summer and start dropping feathers. Yep.
And you did mention in the beginning, in captivity, they can live up to like 50 years. You know, yes, what their natural age range would be?
Yeah, I've heard it's in the teens. Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of hazards out there. One of the biggest hazards I've heard for great horned owls is cars, because they do tend to fly low to the ground. So they get hit a lot by cars, electrical power poles, not so much windows for these types of birds, but windows I believe are the biggest killer of all bird species, but I don't think it's too much of a problem with owls. But mostly cars and power poles are their biggest non-natural predators in a sense. They're enemies. Getting tired, huh?
Mike, since you're asking her to move her head, it's Ralph.
Yeah. Hi, Ralph.
Hi. Since you're asking her to turn her head, if there are any people that are watching that aren't familiar with the spinal column, it's pretty interesting. If you would.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. The other night, when I had her out on my patio, she had turned her head around. Probably they can turn it up to 270 degrees. And she had turned her head around so far that when I saw her turn her head back, I thought she had actually turned it the other way. I was like, wow, you had really turned your head. So, you know, not only 180 degrees to look directly behind them, but 270, you know, 3/4 of a turn all the way around. They can't move their eyes. So anything that they want to look at, they have to move their head. And she's given a little bit of a good example there. But yeah, I'm just amazed at times when I see her move her head. It's just, it's an amazing feat.
And the adaptation so that the supply to the brain isn't cut off.
Yeah, it's just the way that they've evolved, and that ability to move their head is an amazing feat. And she's not doing it now, but when I have her flying free on my patio, the head bobbing that she does to focus is just, it's like a boxer, just constantly moving. She just, you know, you're constantly bobbing your head, trying to get things in focus and orient everything. She doesn't tend to do it much on my fist, but when she's out there by herself, the head bobbing is just, it's amazing. Yeah. Turn your head, look that way. I know.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
when you say you would take birds out hunting, or you
Yes.
might take her out hunting, how often do you do that? Is it like once a week, or?
No, ideally, like when I had my red tails and my Cooper's hawk, at least 3 times a week.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, no, as often as I can. It's too bad I have to work. Oh, I lost it.
Do it during lunch. Oh, they don't
Yeah,
hunt during lunch.
But, no, it's generally an after work thing, usually going out a couple hours before sunset. And that way you can usually get your bird back by the time it's dark. And yeah, definitely an afternoon, early evening type of activity.
Mike, I'm surprised in our bird bath we have, excuse me, Cooper's hawks that no other raptors come to it, but the Coopers do. And they'll do a little bit of bathing and drinking, but the majority of up to an hour and a half, they just sit there and watch.
Just waiting for the little birds to come by. That's why I tell everybody that has a bird feeder that says, oh, this hawk came by and nabbed one of the birds at my bird feeder. And I said, well, you got a bird feeder out there. You're not only feeding the seed eaters, you're feeding the raptors as well. And Cooper's hawks love people that have bird feeders because they're just an attractant for all the little birds that are their primary source of food. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you got a bird feeder, you've probably seen a Cooper's hawk out there for sure. She would turn your head the other way. Go. No.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Show them those beautiful eyes.
Just a comment that regarding Cooper's hawks, they have an uncanny ability to fly right into a thick shrubbery or a tree. And I have a resident one. I have back in my backyard. I have some shrubbery that's pretty thick, and the little sparrows hang out in there all the time. They're always there. And twice in the last 2 weeks, I've been sitting there with my cat in her little tent, and this Cooper's hawk flies like literally so close to my head that I can feel the wind, and it just boom right into the shrubbery, and then out the other side with a sparrow. And I don't know how they do it. It's incredible to watch, though.
Yeah, the Coopers I had, I didn't have too much of an experience with that, but some of the red tails that I've had, and as hard as they have hit the ground when they're coming in from a stoop on a rabbit, they've hit the ground so hard, it's like, oh my God, are you still alive? It's just amazing what some of these birds will go through to try and catch their prey, and how hard they hit. One thing I've noticed with her when she flies around the patio, she tends to hit things really hard as well. harder than I've seen some of my other birds hit. And I've heard that owls do hit their prey pretty hard. They're pretty hard hitters. Yeah, it's amazing how these birds have evolved to catch their prey and how hard they will go after it, for sure. Yeah.
Now, will she be able to go back to sleep after
Yeah,
this?
she'll go back to sleep after this, and then about an hour, right around sunset, she starts getting active. And if we don't get her out sometimes till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, she lets us know. So definitely that's her social aspect. You can see she's kind of calmed down a little bit right now. She's getting comfortable and ready for your afternoon nap. It's like you being woken up at midnight and now you can go back to bed, I guess. So.
Do you have any great horns that visit your neighborhood?
We do, yeah. And, I hear hoots outside quite regularly. But I haven't really noticed any interaction that she has had with them. So, but maybe later.
I've noticed, even though it's pretty light in your home, the owl's pupils are very dilated, they're very large.
Yes.
So,
her pupils.
That obviously the reason why they can see so well at night is because of their eyes. But you'd think the pupils would be very small in your room there.
Yeah, the other thing that I've learned about their eyes is they're not so much a cylindrical eye, or they are a cylindrical eye with a very large, what's it, depth of field. But they're what I've learned about their eyes is they've just been so well adapted to the dark, and also what I've noticed is those pupils are so reactive to any changes of light. Even me just moving my hand in front of her face, will constrict or dilate those pupils. And I even seen if there's stronger light on one side of her face, one pupil will dilate more than the other. Like the eyes on these animals is just an amazing adaptation. There you go. Smile.
Well, Mike, everybody's saying thank you, and she's a
Sure.
beautiful bird. And thanks for taking time out of your day off to present and share her with us. So,
No, my pleasure. I've always enjoyed these raptors, and you get a chance to share them with people. I like to do it. So hopefully at Bird Fest, we'll have it next fall, and we'll have her there at Bird Fest. Yeah.
well, we'll let her go back to sleep.
All right.
Thank you again, Mike, and
All
everybody for joining us today.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Take care.
All
Bye.
right, see ya. Bye.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Take care.